Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, we explore different archetypes of spiritual gifts in Encanto. Mirabel represents those of us who feel invisible, less gifted, and left out. Louisa and Isabel reveal the constant pressure our gifts can create, the pressure to always show up, always be perfect, and always say yes. And in Bruno, we see how our gifts can even screw things up, be seen as unhelpful and even unwanted. It's only when we learn to value the person over the performance that we can truly be a unified body of Christ. We don't talk about Bruno, but we will as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story. The story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from bright and sunny Florida is my buddy Corey. Hey Corey, how you doing today, man?
I'm all right, Paul. You doing okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As we were talking before, we were talking about the busyness of life, all the stuff we've got going on. You know, not gonna do a lot of pre-show banter. We're just gonna be like, Encanto really fits with a lot of the stuff that we talked about, and as well as some of the stuff I think everybody, every guy, every woman struggles with, which is one of the reasons that a movie like Encanto is so popular. So we're going to dive into it. Just came out 21. So if you haven't seen it, you don't have kids. But Corey, when you know, you're the Disney guy, what made Encanto one of the movies that you were excited about discussing here on the podcast?
Well, I think a lot of people would say Encanto or Encanto, however you say it, is probably the best, the last excellent movie Disney made, has made in a while. I think a lot of people have been pretty disappointed with some of the stuff that they've produced in their studios aspect of it. I actually kind of think Elemental was not too bad. I don't know if you saw that movie. Yeah, it wasn't terrible. Not too bad. I don't know if I necessarily feel like I'd love to discuss, but that was a pretty good one. But I wouldn't call it excellent. A lot of them.
What if the elements had feelings?
Right. What if wind had feelings? Yeah, this comes from our discussion of what Pixar is.
All Pixar pictures.
Every single one is always, what if, insert the blank.
What if toys had feelings? What if fish had feelings? What if feelings have feelings?
Yeah, right. Anywho, but so Encanto really is an excellent movie. The music is super, super excellent, to the point where we don't talk about Bruno. I mean, that was played on top 40 radio stations. You know, people who are jamming out to, pop or rap or whatever it is, are also listening to Disney songs on those radio stations. So, and it's just an excellent story as well. I think it's their first major movie set in South America. Well, I guess technically besides Up, although I don't know if I'd call that set in South America. It winds up there, but
goes to there.
But yeah, so why I like Encanto is because I just think it's a really great story with really great music. It's also really pretty, lots and lots of colors. Mm-hmm. There's just not a lot to dislike about it. Everybody can relate, and there's a lot of characters too. It's about a huge family and what they go through, and I just think it's pretty relatable.
It's relatable in that, you've got Louisa, who's the strong one. You've got Isabella, who's the beautiful one. You've got Bruno, who's the black sheep. Apparently, what's her name? Where's my cast? There we go.
You have a family tree in front of you. Is that what you're looking at?
I'm looking for it. Yeah.
We should have a family tree for
you've
our
got,
notes.
I know. Where's that first song of the introduction to the family madrigal?
Right.
You've got Peppa, who controls the weather. So obviously she's the moody one, right? You've got Julieta. She's a healer. So you do have these different, and then you've got Antonio and you got the shapeshifter kid. You've got Camilo. You've got Antonio, who ends up talking to animals. You do have these different almost niches that they fit into. And if you have a family, if you're from a family, you used to have those same niches. The interesting thing that I I think is we enjoyed the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and there's a character on there, Rosa, who's like super tough, really kind of a badass, gruff, non-emotional person. And her voice is Mirabel's voice, which is like, wow, those are two super different characters. And it's like, you're like, wait, do I hear her voice? She also, Stephanie Beatrice, she played in, I think in The Heights as well. So she's got range.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I feel like this is a bit of a Christian podcast. So allow me to do a 30-second sermon that you reminded me of. I forget what his name is, but in the 90s and 2000s, anytime that someone made anything Winnie the Pooh, and anytime anybody made something Transformers, the same guy was cast for Optimus Prime as the same guy who was cast for Eeyore. And so like the big thing is like, man, same voice, but like you get to decide, like, is your voice empowering, or are you bringing everybody down with you? So yeah, I had no idea that she did that Brooklyn Nine-Nine show. But yeah, it's a really, really good movie. If you haven't seen it, obviously we always encourage you to pause and go watch. But if you haven't seen it, it's about this giant family. It starts with the longest song in all of Disney. It's like 8 minutes, super long song, just about all of these gifts. Basically, there's this grandma, and she was her life was saved in this really unfortunate accident, and she was given a miracle. Somehow, this magic candle shows up, and it literally grows a house. And this, I guess she's a young lady back then, but the grandma had three. I guess they're not called twins, triplets.
Triplets.
3 twins. No, she had 3 triplets, and
that'd be 6 kids. That'd be terrible.
That's 3 triplets, I guess, is
so many
9.
kids.
She just had triplets, and when they came of age, this candle gave them magical powers, like you were saying. And when they had children, those children, when they came of age, they had magical powers. And what you find out at the very, very front of this movie is that the main character, named Mirabel, she is the one person in the bloodline family. She's probably, I don't know, 16 or something in the movie. She is the one person that did not get magical powers from this candle. And the whole movie is kind of based on her story, like what it's like to live with a bunch of magical people when everyone expects you to be magical too, but you're just not. You are part of the group, but you are in a weird way outcast.
What was it her dad says? I live with all these exceptional people, right, but I'm unexceptional.
Right. So that's what the movie's all about. And it just kind of, some of course, some bad things happen. People start worrying about, is the magic going to go away? And the plot just kind of takes off after that. And Mirabel has to see if she can, if she can save the family's Encanto, save their magic.
And you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with faith or growth or spiritual maturity or formation or whatever phrase you want to use?
Everything. That's why we're doing this episode.
Everything. Yes. Yeah. And it's always interesting as we discussed before the show of what we see and how we want to frame up the conversation, that we sometimes, this wasn't as stark as me not seeing the prodigal son and Finding Nemo that you pulled.
Right.
But this idea of gifts correlating to Paul's conversation in 1 Corinthians. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I think even this idea of holding on too tightly, like when people first become Christians, when they become followers of Jesus, there is a sort of magic to it. There's an excitement. There's a mountain. And we go through these, as a youth pastor, with the youth camps, there's mountaintop experiences that we want to hold on to. And we wonder, we're afraid of, like they talk about in Revelation, where is your first love gone? We're like, oh my gosh, I'm not in love. And you might have that same feeling about your wife. That spark isn't there like it was in the first several years of marriage. And there was something interesting. I'm pulling in something from football. This guy that I read, he does a lot of scouting, and he talks about, this guy, typically when quarterbacks come in for their first games, they're really good. And they might be really good for like 6 to 8 games, because then defenses start, the coordinators can look at the film, they know their tendencies, and starting about that 6 to 8 game range, from about 8 to 20, their production dips as they try to figure out what's going on. And what he's saying is the real test of a quarterback is once they hit game 15, do they start to bounce back? Do they start to get a handle on how are these defenses approaching me? What are they doing? How are they scheming again to take away what I'm really good at? And how can I adjust? And if the quarterback is like, no, this is what I'm really good at, this is what I'm going to keep doing, then he's not going to succeed. He has to adapt. And so as followers of Jesus, if we look at our lives in that manner and freak out because, hey, I don't seem to be as on fire as that person. I don't seem to have the gifts that person does. As we'll talk about with Mirabel, she looks through the lens of other people. She sees herself in comparison to, her sisters. She's not strong. She can't make flowers. She's not beautifully perfect. She's not this. She's not that. She looks at all the things she isn't. Similar to the football player, the quarterback. If all they do is say, well, this isn't what I can't do this, they'll never grow. They'll never develop. They'll never mature and become everything they're supposed to be, everything they could be. And so this movie is sort of not just for Mirabel, but for all the gifted, all the exceptionals, right? How do they grow? How can they become more than their gift? Because in the situation, Abuela is trying to hold on too much. She's trying to control the magic. She's trying to make sure that everything's perfect, that they're working worthy of the gifting. And to the point where the gifts have become more important than the people. And I think that's where the primary conflict in this movie comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. The gifts become more important than the people. I think that's a good way. To put it. The way I see this movie is this is a greater conversation about the word gifts. And obviously, like you said in 1 Corinthians, the Bible talks a lot about gifts. You have gifts and your friend has gifts, and one of those gifts might be stronger than the other one. So what do you do with that? Is everybody gifted equally? I think everybody's gifted. I don't know if it's all equally. It just is what it is. And you're all, everyone's gifted in different ways. But even at that, the strongest gift of this person may not be quite as strong as the other gift of the other person. And I think as a church family, if you've been around church long enough, you know that sometimes things can get a little awkward. Things can get a little bizarre. And sometimes hard conversations have to happen. And I think that's exactly what you see in this movie. This whole movie is about gifts that serve your family and your community. That's what a spiritual gift is. A spiritual gift is not for you. I think I have the gift of teaching. I don't ever get anything out of my lessons. I just don't. Like, I have never gone back and thought, you know what? I need to hear a good sermon. Let me go listen to something I did. Because I don't get anything out of it. Like, it's never for me. Like, a gift is always for somebody else. And so, in church families, everybody's got gifts, and they're all supposed to be serving different people. The question is, what do you offer for the greater good? And like I said, at the beginning of the movie, we learn in a weird way. It's strange. You don't really know exactly what happened, but for some reason, Mirabel doesn't really have what everyone else would say is a special gift. She's giftless, at least it appears. And she has to decide, what do I do with this? What do I do with being the small fish in the gifted pond? And, am I worthy to still be a part of this? I think a lot of people out there who have felt like, man, I'm just not good at sharing my faith, or I could never do that sermon, or man, I could never lead this ministry. They've got choices. Well, do you just keep trying to do something you're not really good at? Maybe you should just practice more, right? Or should you say, well, I'm just not good at it, therefore, adios, I'll see you. I guess I don't belong here. Or is there a third option? Is there another option where you try your best to figure out what your gift is, and despite what everyone else is looking at, watching at, and seeing, you just do it because God has given you this gift? Think about the parable of the talents, right? And I know the parable of the talents isn't necessarily, it's not just about gifting, but I do see that in that parable in a lot of ways. One guy was given 5 talents, one guy was given 2, one guy was given 1. And obviously the point of the story was not like, hey, the point of the story is never how much do you have. The point of the story is, where's your heart at, and what did you choose to do with what you have? God rewards everybody proportionately equally, right? He doubled the first 2 people's gifts because that's right. They were great. Their heart was in it. And the dude who didn't have a gift, what he chose to do was he chose to say, you know what? I think I'll just sit this out, since I don't think I'm as gifted as these other 2. I'll sit this one out. And he got slammed for it. Got absolutely slammed for it. And so there's a lot of people in our churches who maybe they look around and they compare. First of all, don't ever do that. But they look around and they can't help it. And they compare and they say, well, I'm not as gifted as you. And therefore they sit out. And then there's the gifted people who say, man, I am so gifted, or at least everyone else says I'm so gifted. And then there's a classic church phrase that I like to use. Churches get in real trouble when 20% of the people do 80% of the work, right? That's what it's because everyone's like, well, that guy's the full-time minister. I guess he's just really good at it and he'll just do it, right? Then you get minister burnout, right? And so comparing your gifts and making decisions based off of the comparisons is always going to lead to church dysfunction and burnout and quitting. But then there's other people, if you watch the show, there's multiple times where Mirabel's mom just keeps on trying to encourage her. Mm-hmm. And don't we all have that one mom or that one aunt who they just can't help it. They try to say the little fluffy, nice thing, but just it's just not helpful, right? Mirabel's mom just over and over and over, you are just as special as everybody else. Your gifts are just as good as everybody else. And for Mirabel, it just wasn't true. She quite literally, she didn't have magic. Now, was she not as special? Well, it depends on what you mean by special, right? Of course, in mommy's eyes, you're the most special.
And it's interesting how stuff from we as authors, we know that, if we listen to what our moms say about our writing, then that's not helpful because it's the best thing ever. You're amazing. Thanks, Mom.
Right.
It's almost you're telling me the mom stuff, and But the interesting thing is like why what Julieta is telling her is true. She does have gifts. She is special. It's just Mirabel can't receive it because she's stuck. They're using different measuring sticks for what they considered special.
Yeah, she's stuck comparing herself to everybody else, right? She is still comparing herself to everybody else.
Sometimes it's very challenging, say in a church, like you said, the 80-20, 20% of the work's done by 80, or 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. To feel like I'm not in that 20%. I'm not as gifted. I'm not as special. And we have these men's events that we do here in Charlotte. And we had an event, and I'm part of the leader team. And we had a special event because it was during COVID, so it was super limited and all this. And I was the only member of the leadership team not giving a session, not speaking, for 30 minutes to an hour. And I felt, they must think I don't have anything of value to say. And so I was struggling because I was like, why bother even going if I'm not valued, if I'm not appreciated? Very Mirabelish here, right? And one of the things that I learned that I believe God told me in this, why I decided to show up, was my role does not define my responsibility. I had a responsibility to engage with the people. And we see that with Mirabel. She doesn't have a role. She doesn't have a special magic gift or a door or all this, but she has a responsibility to her family to find out what's wrong. She's the only one who really talks to the other members. Everybody else sort of lives their own lives in these perfectly crafted, image focused performances, basically. But Mirabel's the only one who's going in and she's investigating. She's asking the house what's going on. She hears Abuela praying and feeling like knows her heart for the magic. She asks Dolores. She asks Louisa. And then, she's investigating. She's putting the effort in because her responsibility is find out what's wrong. It's see beneath the facade, see beneath the mask, see the people that are actually, to see the heart of the people behind.
See the people behind the gifts.
Yeah,
right?
see the people behind the gifts.
See the people behind the
Yeah.
gifts. Well, one of the more important scenes in the movie, it comes right toward the front of the movie. Antonio, he's this little boy, and he's of age now, and so he's going to get a gift. And so he goes and he touches his door, and his door opens up, and oh man, he can talk to animals. How crazy! How cool! This is every little kid's dream, right? To be Antonio. He's truly the hero of the story, and so the whole family's happy and excited. They're specifically excited because the last time that there was a gift giving from the magic, it was Mirabel when she was a younger girl, and it didn't work. And so everyone was very afraid that maybe the magic's just over. But of course it doesn't happen. Antonio gets his gift. Of course, how does that make Mirabel feel? Probably really stupid and really like, what is wrong with me? If she's being really honest, she probably would have been fine if Antonio didn't get a gift. Because at least now I'm not alone and feeling awkward and dumb and stupid by myself, right? But he does get a gift. And this huge, huge important scene is where they all go to take this family picture to celebrate. Every time you have a big celebration, there's always an opportunity for a family picture. So they go to take a family picture, and Mirabel's trying to push her way through the crowd, and she can't get there in time. And they forget to wait for her, and they take a picture. And quite literally, the actual the cinematography, it's really cool. It's like it slows down way, 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 like everything's in super slow motion except Mirabel. And we've all felt this before, right? Where something happens, you're like, oh, and you feel so alone and so out there and so by yourself that life seems to just kind of be going through slow motion. And obviously, quite literally, nobody notices you. And I just want to ask the question, we're using this movie basically as a big metaphor for talking about church people and their giftings. How many people at our church have felt like Mirabel before, where there's a time for celebration, something great's happening, and maybe you're even celebrating someone's giftedness, or you are enjoying somebody's giftedness for whatever reason, and life seems to be going through a little bit of slow motion, because not only are you truthfully not a part of it, but quite literally you have been left out of the frame, right? You've been quite literally left out of the frame. And it's one thing to make a mistake, but her family never even notices. They don't correct it. There's not a correction. There's not oh my goodness, take it again. It's done. And I just kind of get the sense that there are probably a lot of church people who feel this way, who feel, man, I have things to offer. I know I do. And yet we just keep celebrating the same thing over and over and over. And there's no room for me. In fact, in this scene, she sings a song and she says over and over and over, she wants to shine, but finds herself on the sideline. That's like this lyric over and over and over. It's like her heart's in it, but she can't find room in the picture frame to jump in. Have you ever felt that way before, Paul?
Yeah, man. I go to a rather large church. It's under the mega church umbrella. And
you're one of those.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, you were saying you got no instruments during your worship, and I'm like, I can't even imagine. I mean, I can, because I've been to churches like that, but my church is people complain about it. Feels like I'm at a concert. So, but there is this focus, much like there was that night, on new believers. It's all about evangelism, new believers. But what about the people who have been there for 8 to 10 years? They're just there, right? We want to celebrate this person. And by all means, we should celebrate somebody, coming to life in Christ. And yet people can feel left out. They can feel out of the frame. Just a few weeks ago, my wife, she is currently getting her doctorate. She is a high-level executive at one of our local healthcare organizations, and she's in this leadership program locally here in Charlotte. So there's like 3 big deal things she's a part of. That's part of the reason that I stay home and take care of stuff so that she can take care of the world, basically. And there was a day she was out. She had some leadership retreat up in the mountains, and she's calling me back, and it's like a Saturday evening or something. And I had been watching my grandson so my daughter could work. Again, these are the choices that I made, so I'm living the life I've chosen. And she's like, oh, I met this person and talked to this person, and it was so much fun and so amazing. And I'm like, I played Legos with Kaysen.
Again.
Just doesn't feel the same. And I think that's one reason this movie resonates, is because, one, who's watching this movie? It's going to be people who are taking care of kids. And there's not many more roles that feel invisible, that feel, am I wasting my time? Do I feel overlooked? I mean, as the parent, if you're taking your kids to the park, you are never in the picture. It's always the kids. I think that connects with people who are sitting at home watching their kids doing what their calling is, because your primary purpose and calling is your family. But there's so many times it feels invisible. It feels like you're not moving the needle. You definitely don't feel celebrated or appreciated, because you're changing diapers, you're doing dishes, you're making lunches that the picky kids won't eat these days. It's like, I just want to make, what will you eat other than, M&Ms and cotton candy? It's like, just eat something that's remotely healthy or remotely not a sugar bomb. And you wonder about your impact on the world. And you wonder if what you do matters. And I think that's what Mirabel in that song is wondering. He's like, I matter, right? Even though you don't see me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's the question. And again, I think it's really sad because I think there are a lot of people that wonder that. I don't think I struggle with being a Mirabel quite as much as probably some people. I think I, probably belong in that.
We'll get to you in a minute.
Right. We will, because we will get to me in a minute. And everybody's we're talking about all these characters going to be in a negative way, so don't hear me tooting my horn. But I'm married to a stay-at-home mom who I know feels exactly what you were talking about, which is, can I ever get in a picture? That's exactly how she feels. My mom specifically has told me, when she dies, we're going to have a hard time doing a slideshow. And I'm like, Mom, stop. Because she's like, I'm never in any of these pictures. I think a lot of moms feel that way. And I think there's a lot of people at our church that can feel that way as well, which is, like you said, I've been going to this church for 15 years, but I still have a hard time getting in the frame. Getting the frame of the family frame of what's really going on, and maybe you're in it, but it's like you're often dismissed. People might say, "Oh, we're so thankful for your participation." You're like, you don't even know what I did. Man, I'll tell you what. One area that I know my wife has felt this way is can be volunteering in children's ministry. Right. At our church, the children's ministry is upstairs. And so you quite literally have to go up and away from everybody else, for often a usually a pretty thankless job. I mean, I know that the 2-year-olds aren't thanking her. No. And you're only noticed when it's like
where'd this bruise come from?
Right.
Why wasn't this diaper changed?
Right. Or when for whatever reason, children's ministry, hey, we're all going to be together in the worship assembly today. It's like, oh man, all these kids are so loud. Thank goodness for those volunteers over there.
Well, I even think about, you can celebrate and say, hey, we had this awesome event at church, this great speaker came in, but she wasn't a part of it because she was stuck with the 2-year-olds.
Right. So, yeah, listen, I mean, this is a problem at a lot of churches. Anytime there's a big, huge, awesome thing, you still got to have a nursery. There's just always going to be someone that can feel left out. And I'm not saying nursery volunteers always feel left out. I know ladies who have felt that way before. But anywho, so moving on in the story. So this is just who Mirabel is. It's how she feels, and it doesn't help, obviously, that she has 2 sisters that she gets compared to, and she compares herself to, and these 2 sisters are especially gifted, right?
Right. Yeah. So we're shifting now from the sort of the pressure of feeling giftless, feeling invisible, feeling overlooked, feeling unimportant, and to the weight of the pressure of the gifts, of the gifted. If you're that 20% doing the 80% of the work, that feeling of, and this is where where that song, the surface pressure came in. I remember the first time I saw this movie, I listened to those lyrics. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because this speaks to our experience. That pressure to be perfect, that pressure to carry the burden and never crack, never break down. And it's not a sudden thing. Like, I always felt like, hey, I'm great in an emergency. I can handle myself in a crisis. It's the day-to-day stuff that Louisa says, that drip, drip, drip of the pressure that adds up, that, Isabella reacts to with, I have to be perfect. I have to be beautiful all the time. I can't be creative. I can't make a mistake. Like, both of them feel that pressure that Mirabel doesn't experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just good writing, right? It's good writing when you take a character and put them up against a character who's so different, and yet their problems are like basically the opposite, and they've got to figure out how to be together. It's kind of a classic little writing trope. But like you said, those people who do feel especially gifted can often feel tremendous amounts of pressure to never be wrong, to never miss, to never be absent, to never mess up. And again,
can't be sick.
You can't be sick. And I think that's why a lot of times ministers can get very, 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 very burnt out because they do feel this pressure. And I think it's real. I mean, hypothetically, if your minister said, hey, I think I'm going to take 3 weeks off and we're just going to let someone at the church preach. Maybe you're at a mega church and you're swimming in the gifts. But sometimes at other churches, maybe that person's just not going to do as good a job as the lead minister who gets paid to do it, in practices and has practiced for 20 straight years every single week.
Well, you bring up an interesting thing. Maybe they won't do as good a job. Is that okay?
That's what you have to ask yourself. Is that okay? Are we okay with sometimes letting people take a break, letting people have some time, letting people, or you put it even more positively? Are we okay with trying to discover other gifts and learning we didn't discover any? But that's okay. We looked and we tried, and now we know.
We learned what didn't work.
We learned what didn't work. I kind of think that sometimes church culture tends to crave so much often to just, kind of secular business culture, which is like, we cannot afford mistakes. Oh, we cannot afford mistakes. Whereas a true family sitting at the Thanksgiving table, you can't afford mistakes. If the turkey's burnt, then don't eat it. Not that big a deal. If someone, didn't do something right, not that big a deal. There's another meal the next week, or, whatever it is. But a lot of times church culture, I think, kind of, rather than becoming like family culture, I think sometimes often becomes a little too much like business secular culture, where it says no mistakes, the bottom line will be affected.
Well, I mean, isn't that what Jesus said? By this, they will know you are my disciples, because you're very efficient, very productive. No, he's like, because you love one another. Because what
you're good at forgiving each other.
Isabella and Louisa felt was that their gifts were more important than their person.
Yeah,
their performance and their productivity was more important than their presence. Hopefully my pop filter is working, because that was a lot of P's.
I'm sure it was.
But how often not just church people, how often do we feel that way? And again, this is why this movie can resonate, is because there's some character in here that you feel like. Maybe you feel like you're the black sheep, so Bruno's your guy. But I think more like there's a reason that you had mentioned that people were taking the lyrics of Surface Pressure to their therapist to work through that truth.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was reading about how therapists have loved the movie Encanto, because it's just fodder for great conversation, because all of these stay-at-home moms are taking this song to the therapist and saying, "This is how I feel. Is this okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, it is." I mean, obviously the song doesn't really offer any solutions, but it's just a great way to feel felt, to be heard. But there's still one more character we really haven't discussed just yet, that I think is obviously really important. And that's what you just said his name. It's Bruno. He's the black sheep.
We don't talk about Bruno.
Well, not yet. We're about to. But again, if you haven't seen the movie, or if it's been a while, Bruno is one of Abuela's one of the triplets. He's the boy. Tio Bruno, I guess, is what they call him, Uncle Bruno. And his gift was the ability to basically prophesy. Okay, so we're getting really, really church gifting here, I guess. To see the future was Bruno's gift. He would have visions and see the future. And he became a little bit of a black sheep because, truthfully, his gift wasn't always positive, because the future's not always positive.
Right.
Or his gift would cause division. He would see things and people would get upset about it. I mean, this is truly like a biblical prophet, right?
Right. Bruno, Jeremiah, they're basically the same guy. Saying things people don't want to hear.
Yeah. He needs to write one of the big old books. What we learned is, like, at the front of the movie, we just learned, hey, the whole family lives here except Bruno. Bruno left a while ago. And you don't really know why Bruno left. But throughout the movie, you kind of find out why he left. He left because he felt like a black sheep, right? He felt like a black sheep. And what's really, really interesting is Mirabel is doing all of this kind of investigation as to why the house is crumbling. Why is the magic failing? Why is the flame flickering? She finds a trap door in one of the walls, and she goes in, and what she finds is Bruno. And so Bruno does live there. He is in the house. He's absolutely crazy person. He hasn't talked to anybody for years except himself. He has all these rats that he lives with.
The rat theater.
He basically sneaks into the kitchen every night and gets food. And it's sad. He even has a table right next to a wall, and there's a little slit in the wall, and he can look through and see the dinner table. And so every night he still eats with his family. I mean, it kind of is a sad moment in the movie. And he says this when Mirabel asks him, like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Why won't you just come out? Nobody knows you're here. What do you do? He says, my gift wasn't helping my family, but I do still love my family. And so he felt quite literally like the black sheep. Was Bruno gifted? Oh, yes, he was. Huge gift. In fact, is there a more important gift than his? The ability to know what's coming. I mean, maybe the most powerful gift of all. And yet he felt like his gift, for whatever reason, was not welcome in his family, or at least just not useful. And so I'm wondering, do we have some Brunos in our church as well? People who, they're here, but they kind of hide in the walls because they feel like, even though they do have some special gifts, they're not useful at their church. You mentioned already, I go to a Church of Christ traditionally. What that means is, we're not a denomination. We don't have a group of people who tell us what we can and cannot do. But just traditionally, we do a cappella singing. We don't even have an organ. We don't even have like a little piano. Absolutely no instruments. It's just a tradition. And at this point, if you grow up Church of Christ, it's what you prefer, right? What a lot of people prefer. If you're somebody and you come to our church and you are incredibly musically gifted, like unbelievably, you might feel like Bruno. Like, I am gifted. I've got this special thing, but I'm not quite sure where that fits at this church. I'm not quite sure it's even useful. And you love your family, but you're not quite sure what to do about it. And so I think that there are plenty of people who kind of at our church, at churches, hide in the walls with their gifts, unsure of what to do.
So many times you're like, I feel these gifts, but I don't know how to use it. And the interesting thing about Bruno was that he couldn't control his gift. He couldn't control the visions that he saw. Louisa could control how she used her strength. Sort of. She listened to the demands of other people and she was sort of a slave to it. Isabella only learned late in the movie that she could create something other than a beautiful flower. And she was excited. She's like, oh, I don't have to make something perfect. The healing, the weather. But Bruno is just like, oh, you want a vision? All right, let's see what we can see. And it was given to him. Like, out of all of the people, like, he had no control over how his gift was utilized.
Yeah, it was what it was.
Right. And that wasn't good enough. He's like, I'm hurting my family. And so again, his his gift was criticized more. Like they cared more about how the gift was impacting the family more than the fact that Bruno was a part of it. It's like, no, that's not enough. And that was one of the really good scenes towards the end when after the Abuela and Mirabel had reunited and Bruno comes flying in on a horse, and again his mother just embraces him.
Yeah,
as she realized the damage of her control of making sure everything was perfect, making sure nothing ever was wrong or made a mistake or whatever. She's like, because she's like, no, we have to almost earn the miracle. And the thing is, you can't earn a miracle. You don't earn your gifts. They're given to you because they're a gift.
Yeah.
If you earned it, it's called a wage.
And that's why, Encanto is such a cool movie because, you've got so many different people represented. You've got people who've got great gifts, but don't know how to use them or are afraid to use them or have been told, hey, we don't do that here. Right. Then you've got people like Mirabel who just call it like it is. Like you're not as gifted as a lot of other people. And you're not quite sure if you fit into that family frame. Then you got people like Louisa, Isabella, who are super gifted. Oh man. And they just have trouble sleeping at night because there is so much pressure on them to perform and get it right. And if you don't, what's going to happen? Bottom line, we are concerned. And then there's Abuela, and there's Abuelas at our church who, maybe at the very, very top, just trying to control everything, trying to lead everything, trying to make sure it's all fits, make sure everything's working well. And when it crumbles, you just don't really know what to do. And so I'm hoping if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard yourself in one of these characters, and you've probably pictured other people in some of these characters at your church, and wondering how best you can fit in as a family, as a talented family, varying levels of gifts. But I do love, and we talked about this in the pre-show, that the ending to this movie is so, so good. And so powerful, and it's hard not to be tearful at the end. I think part of it's just because the music's very, very beautiful, right?
Yeah.
The lyrics themselves are very meaningful. The way the characters' faces look when they see each other. But so what happens at the end? Mirabel and Abuela have this huge fight, and quite literally, their magical house collapses. And my wife pointed this out, but basically anytime anybody in the family had some disunity, the house cracked more and more and more and more. Which maybe there's a sermon right there in and of itself. Your gifts are only as good as your unity. That could be true. Or your gifts only go as far as your unity allows them to. But
I think that goes with what Paul said is you can have all these gifts, but if you don't have love, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you don't have love, you're just a noiseful gong or whatever he said.
You're all the things. It's all worthless. It's noisy. It's annoying. And how much are we loving each other, and how much are we gonging with our gifts?
Right. But it is the end scene. You kind of already alluded to it. Mirabel and Abuela, they find each other at this riverbank where Abuela lost her husband so many years ago. And Mirabel finally kind of sees why she's so controlling. It's because she suffered so much. And Abuela finally sees, why Mirabel is acting the way she is. It's because she doesn't feel seen. And, they embrace and they have a moment and they reconcile. Bruno shows up to try to tell his mom off, try to tell Abuela off, and she hugs him and they reconcile, and they go back to their village and they go back to their family. And Mirabel starts explaining through song what had happened and what she plans to do. And as everybody's beginning to reconcile, of course, the village itself, all the villagers come and they're all helping rebuild everything. And the house is becoming more and more magical, and it's standing back up. And I love the very, very end scene. Like, in order to complete the magic, in order for the house to fully be done, it has to have a magic door. That's kind of a theme in this. All the doors specifically are magical, and there's a doorknob as well. And Mirabel's the only one in the family who, when she was of age and went up to her magical door and she touched it, the door disappeared and there was no magic, right? And it's her turn to complete this house, and her family actually invites her up to the door and says, and when they say, we've made a doorknob especially for you, and they give it to her, and she's going to try to put this doorknob on this door and kind of fulfill the magic again. Not necessarily meaning she gets some special gift now, but just, it's kind of a cute kind of way to tie it all in. And as she's walking towards the door, all of her family is singing in harmony, in a cappella harmony. Our church would be proud. And they're saying, we see how bright you've burned. We see how great you've shined. And like, quite literally, like, this is exactly what Mirabel wanted, right? At the beginning of the movie, in that scene where she gets left out of the picture, she sings, is anyone going to see me shine? I just want to shine. I want to burn bright. I want to be like you. And all of this is coming to fruition, and her family sees her for what she is. And they say, we see how brave you've been, and all this sort of stuff. And my favorite line in the whole movie is Bruno at the very, very end. He gives her the doorknob and he says, you're the real gift, kid. Let us in. Like, it's time for us to be a family again. It's time for us to go inside this house. We don't care how good you are at your gift or how not good you are at your gift, or if you have no gift at all. He says, you're the real gift. Let us in. I just think it's so powerful for everybody listening to this podcast to be reminded that although God has given all of us spiritual gifts for the benefit of our church family, there is no gift that eclipses the one behind it. There's nothing that outweighs the importance of a person. Even if they're hiding behind walls, even if they're out of the picture frame, we have got to make sure that we do a much better job at valuing people over what they can bring, right? Valuing a brother over what they can bring. What they can bring to the table is great, and it's nice, and it's fun. But at the end of the day, if nobody had anything to offer, would we still love them? Will we still value them? Will we still invite them into the picture frame? Because if you look at it from God's perspective, nobody does have anything to offer. I mean, these gifts are great for us, but of course we know and we believe that we offer God nothing. There's nothing we can bring that's even meaningful to Him, other than just simply our heart, right? And saying, I want to belong. And even though I don't bring much, I do want to be a part of this family, and I want to be in.
Yeah.
And if you notice, the last scene, the absolutely last thing that happens in the movie is they take a family picture. And Mirabel's right in the center of it. And they say, all right, 1, 2, 3. And they go to take the picture, but something happens, and like a village dog hits the camera, and everybody, like, it was a cute picture, but now everybody's kind of all off kilter. It's a little blurry. And they save it anyways. And I think it's a great image of, hey, this is our family, and we don't care that we're not perfect. We just want everyone in the frame. Whether you got a 5-talent gift or a 1-talent gift, it does not matter. Everyone matters here. We're going to value the person over the gift. And I think it's just a really, really powerful thing. And I'm hoping a lot of our church people out there, as they're listening, can say, amen, I want to belong to a church like that.
There's a term in basketball that you need a glue guy. And back when advanced metrics were first starting out, they identified this guy, Shane Battier, as this ultimate glue guy. And they're like, he doesn't score that many points. He doesn't have that many assists. He doesn't steal the ball. He doesn't rebound that great. But he makes everybody around him so much better. Like, they're just better when he's on the court. But there's no stat that he's good at, but he makes the team work better. And that's what I think Mirabel her gift was she was a glue guy. She made everybody feel seen, and that's what I loved. Even at the when they gave her the doorknob, and they said, "What do you see? Open your eyes," right? And she's like, "I see me," and she wasn't seeing herself in comparison to the other people around her. She wasn't seeing herself in the gap. She was seeing herself. And so I wanted to sort of close with reading what Paul had in 1 Corinthians 12. Because he talks about the human body has many parts, but many parts make up one whole body. So it is with the body of Christ. Some of us are Jews, some of us are Gentiles, some are slaves, some are free. But we have all been baptized into one body by one Spirit when we all share the same Spirit. Yes, the body has many parts, not just one part. If the foot says, I'm not a part of the body because I am not a hand, that does not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear says, I'm not a part of the body because I am not an eye, how would that make it any less a part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, how would you hear? Or if your whole body were an ear, how would you smell anything? But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where he wants it. How strange a body would be if it only had one part. There are many parts, but only one body. The eye can never say to the hand, I don't need you. The head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. And whatever our gifts are, whatever your role is, even if you feel like Mirabel and you feel invisible, God has put you just where he wants it. If you feel the pressure of a Louisa or a Isabella, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how you grow. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's like, yeah, you actually grow more from conflict. You grow more from speaking the truth than trying to be perfect. So thanks, Corey, for coming on here and talking about Encanto. As I told you, this movie, there's certain parts of it that I always get super choked up and emotional at, and no matter how many times I've seen it. So thanks for making me cry again in my office.
I always enjoy making you cry.
So this has been Paul McDonald and Corey Stubney talking about Encanto. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?